Center Town Hall. We appreciate you coming out. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we got a sign-up sheet in the back. If you think you might want to ask a question, we're going to hold all the questions to the end, so each presenter will have time to get their information out. We'd like to finish up around 8:30. We're not going to hold it right to 8:30, and we have about 15 minutes worth of questions. On that sign-up sheet, if you will put your email, so if we have a question that's going to take some analysis or some additional information, we'll be able to email out that answer to everybody that is signed up. So we will put that information out. In January, I'll be completing 30 years as a county administrator in 2 counties. So I did let the board know back in the middle of the month that I plan to retire on February 2nd. So it's not resigning. I'm going home to work on my 50 acres to keep me way busy. I leave there every morning going, geez, I got all this to do. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. I've been working full-time 41 years, and when you add in part-time through college, even 4 more years on that. So I've been working a long time. So anyway, I wanted to make sure that that was clear because it was out on Facebook with a little bit of, as we all hear about, misinformation. Our first speaker tonight, and please keep in mind that a few of these people are county employees. For actual Board of Supervisors meeting, there are a few board members in attendance. I've seen Mrs. Long, Mr. Seeley, and Mr. Thomas are here, and probably some others that are, Mr. Forehand's in the back, watching on YouTube. But this is not a Board of Supervisors meeting. This is an informational meeting. We're trying to have that for you and the viewing public that may be watching on YouTube. But any comments about any particular projects need to be saved to when those appear before the board. You'll have plenty of time to comment both at the Planning Commission and at future Board of Supervisors meetings, if any future data center developments, Jericho Road. So anyway, if you keep that in mind, those folks that are sort of here as volunteers, are not in the decision making. That is the 6 Board of Supervisors members. Our first speaker is Leon Hughes. He's the Director of Planning, Community Development and Planning for the county. He arrived here in February. Most all of these data center projects that we have in front of us all were preceding his arrival. He comes to us from Spotsylvania, and then prior to Spotsylvania, he was in Prince George as planning director. So he has many years' experience as a planning director, and he's going to discuss sort of the PERC development, which was that whole designation was also ongoing before his arrival. So he sort of inherited this PERC process, overlay district.
Dave, you ready? All right, good evening, everyone. I have the honor and pleasure of starting the evening off, and my goal is to explain plan innovation and research technology areas here in Caroline County. Caroline has 2 areas in the county that have been recently identified on the future land use map for development of research and technology businesses and industries within a campus-like setting. Sure. Which it means it's not typically parcel specific. The comprehensive plan is to be developed with the purpose of guiding and accomplishing a coordinated, adjusted, and harmonious development of the territory, which will, in accordance with the present and probable future needs and resources, to best promote the health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, and general welfare of the inhabitants, including the elderly and persons with disabilities. The plan is to identify long-range recommendations for the general development of the county. This is why the future land use map may identify an area that is suitable for uses that are different than the current. Body must initiate an amendment. Caroline, like most jurisdictions, allows property owners to ask for an amendment to the plan if they are seeking a rezoning of land and the desired use does not comport with the current future land use identified on the map. If the board deems the request worthy of consideration, the board refers the matter to the Planning Commission for consideration and recommendation. The comprehensive plan is considered a living document because it may be amended to adjust to changes that occur in the community. An amendment to the future land use map designation of an area does not change the zoning on the property. or the allowed uses on the property, nor does it change how the real estate taxes are assessed. It only changes what type of development is considered appropriate. General, it is to consider the long-range outcomes. It must be updated every 5 years, and an amendment to the plan does not change zoning or tax assessments. So just some highlights on the Caroline Comprehensive Plan. Caroline County adopted its first plan in 1977. The first major update was in 1987 with the expansion of the primary growth area. Then in 1995, future development areas were introduced. In 1998, development area plans begun. In 2001, the first area plan was adopted. That was the Ladysmith Plan. Between 2004 and 2008, there were 5 plans, developer owning property. And also at that time, the Commonwealth of Virginia mandated that jurisdictions identify areas within their boundaries suitable for urban development areas. So it's kind of twofold, driven by the Commonwealth and also by the fact that we had a property owner who had property that they wanted to develop in that manner. And then in 2023, the planned innovation, research, and technology parks were again driven by development and the expansion of data centers in the Commonwealth. So when discussing the comp plan, the other critical component is the zoning ordinance. So the zoning ordinance is the companion document to the comprehensive plan, and it is of Caroline. The zoning is a legislative power granted to the governing bodies by the Code of Virginia to regulate land use in Virginia. So what is planned industrial research and technology? So in June and in September of this year, the Caroline County Board of Supervisors amended the county's comprehensive plan and designated 2 new growth areas in the county for development of research-based industries, specifically data center uses and the ancillary uses that support and accompany this industry. The first area adopted is comprised of 1,430 acres in the northeast section of the Carmel Church growth area. This area was identified as appropriate, and several parcels in that area currently zoned for industrial use. And probably most important, the area is not densely populated with residential uses. The second area, the Mattamead area, is similar to the Carmel Church area in that it has power lines as well, a 235 and a 500 kV line running through the area, has the ability to be served by water, wastewater, and industrial water to serve the data center uses, and has a good transportation network in place. And there again, there's limited residential development in the area. With the benefit of lessons learned and seeing the issues that other jurisdictions, because of the large amount of undeveloped acreage in these areas, the existing and available infrastructure, and the adoption of the PERT ordinance. The companion zoning designation is the PERT zoning district that is included in Article 11 of the Plan Unit Development section of the zoning ordinance. The PERT zoning ordinance that was recently adopted with standards for the built environment of data center campuses. The ordinance incorporates submission requirements, development standards that are intended to further mitigate impacts of data centers with significant setbacks, landscaping, screening, buffering, design, noise, and environmental protection requirements. While reviewing standards in the country, the Sierra Club provided a letter yesterday that included 26 policy suggestions, and of those 26, the recently adopted PERT includes 15 right now. So this is the county's future land use map right now. And it identifies the 2 areas I was talking about. The 2 growth areas for PERT are one here in the Carmel Church community plan, you see in the northwest corner there, and then the Mattamead growth area up here. The northern boundary is the Polecat Creek. The power lines are a good landmark for the western boundary. And then the southern boundary is the creek at the bottom. Oh. So this is an aerial of the Carmel Church Pert area. And I think what is interesting for landmark's sake, this is the rail line here. This is Route 207 here. And this is the power lines here. And what's interesting about this area, if you know, like I said, we chose areas that are not heavily populated with residential development, is all this green is undeveloped acreage. Now, there are some residential uses in here, but there aren't. Area is comprised of 12 parcels totaling 1,285 acres. The majority of this area north of the Matter River was recently rezoned for the Amazon data center project. And there again, like the Carmel Church area, as you can see, this area is a lot of open space, large parcels, and very few residential uses. And it's adjacent to Spotsylvania County and very close proximity to Interstate 95. With the designation of these areas in these not very densely populated areas, the one thing that the county is seeking to avoid, I'm going to show you on that picture, is the proximity of future data centers in Loudoun County to the residential development. So that's what we seek here not to do, have data center development in close proximity to residential development. Thank you.
Would come forward, we appreciate it. If you've got a PowerPoint, here's your.
Yeah, thank you. I have a PowerPoint in the nick of time. If anybody saw us just doing some serious IT work over here, that's what we were trying to figure out. So I'll just wait for this to connect. I guess actually, while we're waiting, quick introduction. So as was stated, I work for Stack Infrastructure. I run our public affairs organization. I was really excited when Gary invited me to come and speak tonight because I live up in Fredericksburg, so this is just down the road. And I think having these conversations in our communities is incredibly valuable and important. Stack has no developments in Caroline County, so this isn't coming from a personal business interest. This is more just my experience in the industry and being able to share data center development information and an overview with all of you today. Perfect, thank you. All right, so when I was thinking about how to kind of provide this overview, I wanted to start from a 10,000-foot view around data center development. We talk a lot about these facilities in Virginia because this is the largest data center market in the world, which I think is something pretty impressive when you think about some data. As of this quarter, there are about 5.3 billion people around the world connected to the internet. And in last year alone, 189 million new people got online. When we think about that, we think about the incredible scale that the internet has grown to in just a couple of decades. But it's also a reminder of why continued internet infrastructure growth is so important. Every day, more people are getting online for the first time. And as they get online and as they access the internet, they are trying to have the same online experiences that all of us have today. This is an important driver for internet infrastructure and for more data centers, but it's not the most important one. It's not the biggest one. Think of that as right now, I think most of us, I was just looking at my cell phone, have a 5G internet connection or mobile network connection, which I think a couple years ago, that was like the rave, right? Everybody's like, we're going to 5G, it's going to change the world, all this stuff, everything like that. Well, before that, we had slower mobile networks. We could do a little bit less. We'd go to load our map to try to get to a community event like tonight. It might take a little while, or maybe you get a little spotty as you run into some connection issues. But our networks are evolving. And as our networks evolve, both our mobile networks, but also our networks at home that we use for our Zoom calls for work or telehealth or checking our calendars. The demand for data and for internet infrastructure to support those activities, infrastructure that goes into providing the experience. So that's another big driver for data center infrastructure. The third is the one that I think we get the most hype about and that we hear the most about, which is new products, right? The things that we hear about today are the exciting things that are being marketed to us. And sometimes we forget to take for granted how just in a few years, things that seemed like the faraway future are now everyday occurrences when it comes to our online experience. So, tech companies around the world, and not just tech companies, your everyday average companies, your biggest companies that have been around for 100 years are actively developing the products and experiences of the future that we're able to take advantage of as consumers, and as networks that people are using are becoming more sophisticated and more data can go over them, and new products are coming out. 3 core drivers. So what is internet infrastructure? And I really don't want to give a lecture because, well, not really an academic. Look, I learned about this stuff on the job. I started in data centers in 2009 as a contractor working up in Ashburn, just trying to pay for school. And what I learned fundamentally is that there are a couple of key things that make up internet infrastructure that provide all the experiences that we have today. First, it's us. So us with our devices, phones, laptops, smart refrigerator, if you have devices that are a core part of internet infrastructure because they're the endpoint. They're what everything is being delivered towards for the thing that we're trying to do. To connect everything, we have our networks. This one's very obvious. Everybody here connects to a network, whether mobile or fixed, if they're ever using the internet. And this is just the series of interconnections that happen from, our devices to our AT&Ts, our Verizons, T-Mobiles, Comcast. Got to name a bunch so I don't get a note saying that I advertised for companies and didn't catch all of them. But those are the networks that we're using that are connecting our end devices to something. So what is that something? That third thing are data centers. It's the server infrastructure or computers that are storing data and processing data. Like, hey, there's like 30 more layers in here because it does get very complex very fast, but this felt like the most important pieces to call out. So, all right, data centers, we understand their role, but what do data center developers do? I think this is an interesting question because I started my career in data centers not as a developer, but on the technical side, working on servers, working with engineers to kind of create these digital experiences. But fundamentally, what a data center developer does, like a Stack Infrastructure, who I work for, is it's almost like a mall, or for one client, almost like a Walmart, I guess would be a way to put it. And what we're doing as developers is we're really that construction and asset owner side. And then we'll have an end tenant come inside of the building, or multiple end tenants, and they're leasing space, they're leasing power, and they're putting servers in there. They're connecting them to those networks to provide the experiences that you have on your devices today. So that fundamentally, that's how I see my role, my company's role, and what I'm here to support doing. Generically, to the average eye, they all look kind of the same. They're all really different. A lot of different technical specifications across every element of the facility. So I try to get a rendering of a facility that Stack would design to give you a little bit of a rundown of what we're looking at when we're looking at a data center facility. So this is an aerial view of a 3D rendering. As you can see, parking lot. The facility may have the look exterior-wise of a box store or distribution facility, but one thing that you can notice right away when you realize it's not distribution is far fewer parking spots and not a bunch of loading bays. And I think what's important to point out about that is when thinking about development, thinking about trade-off for different land uses, data centers, hundreds and hundreds of people come in day in and day out to work in these facilities, and that's kind of indicated by the size of the parking lot. So I like to keep things simple, so when I'm looking at buildings, I'm like, small parking lot, probably a data center. On the roof here, you'll see that there are these blocks. This is essentially our HVAC equipment. So data centers, they're in the business of keeping computers cool, right? So we're doing a couple of things. We're powering computers, and then we're keeping them cool in the space, because as they get powered and as they do their thing, they produce heat. Simple concepts. So a big role that our facilities have is to make sure we can keep rooms cool. And so what we're doing is we're going to vent a little bit, just because it feels like it's something that people often want to talk about. While there's a large diversity in cooling technologies, there are kind of two main buckets that I think are always worth talking about. So one is what we call a closed loop cooling system. This looks a little bit more like your traditional AC unit you might use for your house, but the concept is that inside the facility we have a closed loop system that has a combination of water and glycol that you pretty much, once charged, very rarely have to change or flush. It's a great system. It's a highly efficient system for cooling. But what we've noted as developers over time is that while effective, it's a little bit more energy intensive to cool that way. So back in the day, a water-cooled system, essentially it was drawn on a napkin, but it's a swamp cooler, more or less. No insult to the engineers that have created really sophisticated systems. It is fundamentally a swamp cooler in concept. So you've got cool water that trickles, you got air that passes over the water, that cools the air down. That air is filtered, it's fed to a space, and then it's either vented or recirculated. Highly efficient from an energy perspective, but it uses a little more water. And so, you know, as development companies at a high level, we're kind of thinking between our systems, you know, what are we trying to optimize for into our design and our cooling systems as well? You know, what resources are available? Stack develops in Phoenix, Arizona. You know, so we know a thing or two about developing in a water distressed area. And, you know, it's a really important conversation. It's one that's dynamic, and it's with communities and local government. So just wanted to highlight, you know, that's what we're looking at on the roof here. On the back side, we have backup generators. So generators are essential to these sites because, I mean, everything I talked about how we use these facilities, there's an expectation that they never go down. 24/7, 365. Our goal is to use primary utility power at all times, but you know, our friends at the utility do a phenomenal job, and you can't have an instance where that takes down a facility that's maybe supporting life-saving technology, important communications, business, payments. So in those instances, you're going to need some backup generation. And so every single facility that you'll see for a data center development will have some form of backup generation. So that's kind of the core components I want to point out about the building here. So what's inside these things? You know, I love it because it feels like data centers can be pretty secretive, but then you open the proverbial, you know, so think of this kind of as our power path system. These are some power distribution units. We'll have a, you know, front office where we have security who are making sure anybody going in and out are supposed to be in the building. We'll have a mechanical gallery where these are some louvers here where you'll kind of see them open or close to let air in and out. And then this is what it's all about right here. This is a data hall. So this is just an empty data hall. And what'll happen is when a facility is turned online, that'll be filled up with blinking lights because it'll be chock full of computers.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll have, oh, here's your water. I drank all that, I'll have to run out. Kevin, we appreciate that. Next, we have Nicole Riley, Senior Vice President of Policy and Strategic Partnerships with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. VEDP is the acronym you may hear. And so she's going to talk to us about state perspective of data.
Thank you so much for the opportunity for me to be here. As mentioned, my name is Nicole Riley. I'm Senior Vice President at VEDP. That's our nickname for short for the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. We were created in 1995 as the Commonwealth agency to bring about economic growth for Virginia. And we do that by attracting new companies to the Commonwealth, as well as working with our existing companies in Virginia. Had great collaboration with your folks here in Caroline County and others here in this region when we're talking about projects that are coming to an area. And so we provide a lot of support to that, and we enjoy working with them to bring, great jobs to communities across the Commonwealth. So just to kind of talk a little bit about the history of data centers in Virginia. It's kind of important to know that this was kind of a policy that Virginia took on as a Commonwealth to be a leader in the data center. Incentive that was created by this legislation is a sales tax exemption for data centers when they are purchasing the type of equipment that Kevin was just pointing out that goes into a lot of their facilities. And be able to provide them that incentive. Over the years, you can see here, and I should say when that legislation was created in 2008, it did create a sunset. So it was going to expire, only go through about 2011. So that's why you see these couple more years where the data center legislation, definition of equipment, we also saw the extension of the sunset. And so currently, and I should say all of these exemptions, a company does not qualify for this exemption unless they meet certain criteria when it comes to capital investment, the number of dollars that they are investing in the project, as well as new jobs. And so the current statute that was amended and changed in 2016 requires a minimum of $150 million in total capital investment and the creation of 50 new jobs. And the sunset date was extended to country with the most data center activity. And we continue to see growth and interest in expanding here in Virginia. And this just shows you how that has taken off there in the latter years as we got that last extension. We are seeing for a lot of data center companies, they are looking at least 20 years out for their investment. This just gives you some data points on the significant economic impact that the data center industry has had here in Virginia. These are all numbers from 2022. And so just in 2021, there was $15.3 billion of data center economic output in Virginia. The data center industry directly impacts and employs 13,000 jobs across the Commonwealth. And these are high-paying technology and blue tech jobs, everything from engineers to HVAC, electricians that really work in the complexities of what data centers need. It also, the industry also, pretty much for every job, one job that they have within their data center, it supports 4 jobs outside of that data center in the community. And there was even a more recent national study that came out just this year, a couple months ago, that showed that nationally, data centers, the ratio is for every 1 job, there are 6 jobs, indirect jobs. Also want to talk a little bit about the benefit centers are significant. An example is Loudoun County receives over $600 million in tax revenue. That's about 30% of their budget that they're able to put towards other investments there in the county. It does, what we also see is that there's minimal demand for services such as law enforcement, schools. And so this translates into more opportunities for localities to invest in better economic and community infrastructure, such as schools, broadband, and other county services that you would want to provide. Particularly, we also see that it's helpful for those counties with dwindling population, tax bases. Center operators also are very involved in their local communities. They tend to support and provide charitable opportunities there in the county, particularly supporting education and workforce, because of course that does help with their pipeline. We've seen examples in Henrico County, for instance, where Meta or Facebook, but the parent company Meta, they have created a grant foundation that supports local education in science and math and technology, as well as most recently during the COVID pandemic. So what are the factors that go into a data center company looking for where they want to go? What are some of the main factors? And you can see first, obviously, they need to have a site that that's prepared and that's going to be large enough for what they're looking for. But the two other really most critical factors are energy as well as fiber optic networks. So those are certainly very important. But the interesting thing is they actually have been a catalyst to look at clean energy alternatives when it comes to their power sources. So they also have very aggressive sustainability goals that they want to meet. And so to do that, they do have to be looking at other clean energy. In fact, 4 of the top 5 largest clean energy buyers in the country are data centers, and at least 8 data centers are listed on the EPA's Clean Power Partnership list. So here looking at sort of, that we're looking at now. And I think the biggest thing here is understanding that first, traditional, as we see the traditional data center clusters become saturated and face other challenges. And these are areas certainly up in Northern Virginia where the availability and cost of land has become very expensive. We have seen data centers looking to see if they can expand further down the I-95 corridor. But the interesting thing here is that it's also the change that we've seen in their needs for what they're looking at. I mentioned before that data centers are trying to plan out 20 years out for what they're going to need is very critical. We have seen them move to a more new common best practice of looking at campuses and being very basically master planning their location. Instead, where we've seen in previous areas, because the growth was so quick, a lot of it was patchwork. And so that's why we're seeing some of the challenges that we're seeing in Northern Virginia. But here there's an opportunity for localities to be working with the companies in this master planning. And that's really critical. That's where the locality and the data center, like where the power is. As I mentioned, that's a real significant factor in their locations. So, if you already have an area that has that power's been planned out, then maybe you don't need to, to be looking at having to create new transmission lines. But it allows you that opportunity, as I mentioned, with master planning to really think through where things are going. Because as I mentioned, they want to plan out for about 20 years. And that's it. So I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you and happy.
Which is power supply. So we got Dominic Miner, Economic Development Manager, Data Centers, Dominion Energy. So if you have a PowerPoint, here's the pointer. If you don't,
Hi, good evening. I'm Dominic Miner. I'm the Economic Development Manager for Dominion Energy, and we work really closely with, here's Felicia with Rappahannock Electric, but I'll kind of speak from the Dominion perspective, and then Felicia will talk in timelines to kind of build it. We work very closely with all of the localities and all of the distribution operators within Dominion service territory. And what we do is each year we put together a overall transmission forecast, and that's submitted to PJM, who is our transmission operator, and they actually operate within 13 different states within the United States. And so what PJM does is they say, okay, Dominion, based on your projects and kind of go through our due diligence period to see, how are we going to build this necessary infrastructure? Do we need to obtain new right-of-way? All of those different things we look at, and then we kind of get out in the community to understand what are the impacts of this new transmission infrastructure. Are we routing in a way that makes sense? You essentially want to kind of plan your development in one area. That way you don't have transmission going from one side of the county to the other. And so I think just having some of these kind of proactive conversations very early on, it does help siting and infrastructure for overall data center growth.
cooperative, so a lot of these data center projects and inquiries will actually begin in my department, and we're the ones who take care of them. And to complement a lot of the reasons that make a site attractive from the electric perspective, because anytime that they have enough land that they can develop for 10 to 20 years, that lets them avoid playing the whack-a-mole real estate game of where can I find another little corner. They just want to find one place that they can settle into and they can grow. They're looking for that proximity to all of the fiber network. A lot of that comes up along the I-95, and then they're looking to be as close as Dominion is the one who owns the transmission line. So they have that bulk transmission, really high voltage lines. That belongs to Dominion. So anytime we're working a project, we're doing it in partnership with them. Dominion figures out, they do all of the engineering and the studies on the transmission side to say, here's how I get enough electricity to the lines. And then they break it down. They bring down from their 230 kV line. It comes into our substation, and then we break it down to a voltage that's acceptable to go into the back of a data center hall. So we do this in partnership with them, and as close as possible to the existing electric infrastructure. A lot of times when a project is talking to me for the very first time, they're like, will you serve me? We are obligated to serve everyone who wants to do anything with electricity within REC's footprint. And that's part of having our particular territory. It's not up to us to say, well, I'll serve your house, but not your house. I'll serve your barn, but not your barn. We are obligated to serve everyone. We just have to do the engineering work to figure out how. So it always comes down to a matter of time and money. We can build to any demand on any site. And then on the low voltage, on the distribution side, what would it take for REC to do our portion? Put the two together, and then we go back to the company and we say, this is what it's going to take. This is how long it's going to take to get it all done. And this is what it's going to cost. Does that work for you or not? Companies and projects, they bail out and they fail at all different steps of the process. And so anytime we can have that clarity on the front end with them and very real in terms of time and cost and commitment, being a cooperative means that we are a not-for-profit. Our goal with them is the same exact thing that our goal is with you. And I warn everybody at the very beginning, you will pay 100% of your own cost. And they get excited at the beginning, and then some of them go when the bills start coming, right? And so we let them know whatever it costs to serve you, because usually when you're talking a data center campus, you're talking a dedicated substation on site behind their security, and then substation security as well. So you're having multiple layers of security. You're going to pay 100% of that. Whatever electricity that you use, you are paying 100% with this particular electric provider, or do I not want to? But that's something that we're very clear about. We're very rigid about making sure that there's no risk and no spillover, not only between individual accounts, but also between classes of account. So you as a neighbor do not share cost for your neighbor. Residential accounts do not share costs with small commercial accounts. We make sure, and we do a lot of study and analysis to make sure that every person and every class and type of customer is completely independent. So that's something I'm very clear with them in the front end. And for some people, they say, no, I'm not interested. And for others, they decide to move forward. They appreciate the fact that their cost is their cost, their risk is their risk, and that is completely isolated for them. We do all kinds of analysis and firewalls and all sorts of things to make sure that there's no bubble and spillover as well, because that's what it is, right? Every single member has a vote. And so every single member is responsible and has that independence for themselves. Some of the process that we go through, again, the sooner I can figure out if someone is serious or not, if they're able to get all the way over the finish line or not, that helps us free up staff time and resources. So before we can even do anything, before I can even talk to Dominique and say, hey, we have somebody considering something, they have to show me a full developed site plan. And they have to have some sort of control and interest in that land. And then they have to develop a load ramp, which is how much electricity in what quarter between first construction all the way out to the very last building is completely filled. Show me that entire 10, 20, 15-year ramp, whatever it is. And then they have to actually pay us deposits, because I'm not going to my engineers, I'm not going to my designers to start doing their work until they have paid and put money in their account for us to be able to do that. And that, again, keeps costs down so that there's not this generic overhead that just flows to everybody. You're going to be paying a pretty big tab. Do you really need all 20 of us? And those kinds of reality checks, again, helps keep some of that cost and that creeping scope and other things under control. So once we have all of that information, that's when we go to Dominion and we say, hey, here's all of the documentation. This is what they want to achieve. Can you look at this from the transmission perspective? So that's what Dominique was talking about. We gather all that information, we go back. This is what it's going to take, how long, how much money. By the way, if you're going to move forward, you got to start signing these contracts, these agreements. You got to start paying me this money. Here's the invoices, everything. They have to make those decision points, and they have to decide, are they committing or are they not? Air contractors, civils, environmentals, right-of-way, it's all sorts of people. And it's just really full-on elbow grease, everyone rolling up the sleeves to be able to meet all the milestones and the deliverables. So that's just kind of a quick snapshot of how we work the data center projects and some of the things that we expect from them. And kind of how it goes. That entire process, it takes years. It's from very first inquiry all the way to you now have an energized substation and you can start doing your data center halls and, you know, all those blinking lights can turn on. That is a process of years. It takes a lot of coordination and effort to do projects of this size, but it is fun and it is most reliable, least expensive, and giving the level of service that we offer to everyone, because everyone who receives electricity from us is a member of REC. You own and pay for our company, and we appreciate that, and we want to make sure that we're honoring that for everyone. Dominique, anything more on the electric side? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. That's what happens when I get off my cheat sheet and get on the main agenda. I forget part of who I'm supposed to announce. But Dominic and Felicia, thank you so much for bringing us, have the chapter. So that's, and if you have a PowerPoint, right there.
Hello, I am not Paige Westlink, if you didn't notice. My name is Tim Sawinski. I work for the Sierra Club. I lead our communications there. And Paige actually has a bit of a cold today, so she asked me to be her voice, which is kind of what I was hired for in the first place, so it's fitting. We want to personally thank Caroline County and decision makers here for supply side, or from advocates who've been trying to keep track of this issue. And our main point of being here is just to make sure that communities are empowered with the knowledge and information they can to make sure that everyone, all stakeholders involved, are either held accountable or are engaging with you all in a meaningful way. So to really establish our stance, quote unquote, from the Virginia chapter, we are not anti-data center, but we do believe that there are concerns that that have yet to be addressed tonight, or at least elevated to you all, that are important to be had in the early stages of this. And it sounds like, as from what I can tell, all the stakeholders involved in here have been acting in good faith. So with that, I'll just go ahead and, I think questions are later, but so I'll just move on from that commentary. But what I would just say is what we are concerned about predominantly right now boils down to three different issues. That is the water usage that these facilities have to operate under, and the potential pollution that they bring about with their emergency power, the potential costs can consume as much water as the same amount of 50,000 homes per day. That is a lot of water. I don't drink that much water in a day. I don't know if anyone else does, but that's a lot of water. In an area like this, which has farmland, there are obviously concerns over how that water is going to be used and not wasted, so to make sure it's not consumed. The other point that we would also like to, and by the way, we've mentioned that Virginia is the highest concentration of data centers. So what I'm talking to you today about has really just been a collection of case studies and concerns that other communities have. This is just one of them. In all their states, there have been problems with data centers not being as forthcoming about how much water they have used. It was Google, I believe, in Oregon, who wasn't being upfront about how much water was being used. The amount of water that was being used was more than 1 million gallons per day once that finally was put there. It's my understanding from the documentation that we reviewed here that there has been an actual line item to it, which is 200 200,000 gallons a day, starting off, and then 300. We've been experiencing larger heat waves in America, across Virginia and in Virginia. What is the plan if there is a drought? How will we make sure that there's still enough water to supply, whether it's farmland, local drinking sources, et cetera, if there is a drought? Are there accountability measures put in place to make sure that if the worst case scenario happens, there's a plan put in place? The other side of it, of course, is air quality. We know in other parts, especially in Northern Virginia, that emergency power of data centers is diesel generation. Now, diesel generation, and cardiovascular illness, especially impacting children and older people. And if the emergency power is switched on, and is it diesel generation, which we could not identify for this particular project, what are the protection models in place? Are people going to be able to breathe clean air in a community like this? Should there be the switch? And the reason I bring up emergency power is the next point, and that is the sheer power usage of facilities like this. 3% of the world's energy is just dedicated to data centers. That is one of the highest industry consumers of it by, that is the largest commercial use of their energy portfolio. And as we continue to attract more data centers as a data center hub of the world, that energy usage has to go up. And as of right now, Dominion Energy does not have the power capacity to sustain them. They've said this, as has PJM, our interconnected grid, as has the Department of Environmental Quality. We cannot shut down particular polluting projects that we know are harmful and are inefficient because we need to use that power. And the biggest driver of power usage in Virginia right now is data centers. So it's a question of sustainability, reliability. Are we going to be able to have reliable energy if data center growth collectively, not just in this place, but collectively, it should be written and affirmed by local decision makers and engagement with the community that it's going to be homes 100% of the time, especially as we experience hotter and colder weather throughout the year. There have been issues in Northern Virginia where it's been on the precipice of having to shut down the power to data centers because we just didn't have the sheer energy to do it. That's the reality. And I think that's a potential concern. The other point that we like to talk about is cost. Total cost, not just the cost of the cost of construction into our monthly electric bills. That's what happens. And as of right now, citing specifically because of data centers, what they have shown to the State Corporation Commission, the entity that decides whether or not a project is approved and paid for by us, Dominion has submitted a plan that says they want to build a new feet of the cost of these construction costs go up, and that gets passed on to us. You can look up line items on your bills if you are a Dominion customer like me, and you can see what we're paying for. A lot of that is transmission, which is really expensive. The fuel of natural gas, because of international events, the price of natural gas has really gone up. And then other projects, little line items, this power station here, this project over here, et cetera. Now, why is the fossil fuel thing important as well? Well, even from outside of a climate perspective, Virginia has passed something called the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And the Virginia Clean Economy Act mandates that on to customers. So I'm not trying to say or to sway anyone's opinion. We're just trying to give you information about what could happen and what the potential impacts of a large scale industry like this is. It's a massive campus, and it's potentially has great benefits for the community, but also there's unintended potential consequences. These are the things that we need to be speaking about. These are the things we need to be thinking about. And these are the things we need to be making sure the communities are engaged in the conversation about. That's why we're here. I'll leave it there because I want to be respectful. But there are still concerns, whether it's cost, whether it's pollution, whether it's the water intake. These are things that should be discussed because it's not too much to ask. It's not unreasonable to ask our decision makers to make sure there's meeting involvement with the community and due diligence around large scale projects, especially the ones of this size. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll probably have some questions at the end for you all, so please hang around. Next, we have Richard Doucette, the Regional Director, Northern Regional Office of the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality.
Virginia Department of Environmental Quality has a very large role within the data centers, and it continues to be our mission to promote health and well-being and protection of the environment. I didn't want to bring in a bunch of slides to talk about all the different permits because I realized I was near the end and people probably heard us all talking. I don't want you to get too sleepy, so I will try and keep it to kind of a higher level topic and we can talk later on. Our primary job is to issue permits and to make sure that those permits are followed through compliance and enforcement. Some of the media that we would be passing permits for related to data centers would include air permitting, the Virginia Water Protection Program, which is wetlands. We would do water withdrawal permits, water discharge permits. Local zoning has already decided where to put a location, and we do not accept applications for processing until they already have the local government approval. So that's where we come in at the second step. At the very start, we want to look at how the land is going to be prepared. So we talk about the Virginia Water Protection Program. This is where we regulate land clearing, filling, excavating, dredging. Specifically interested if you're disturbing wetlands or streams. So 2 acres or less than 1,500 linear feet of stream, they get something called the general permit, which is very uniform, doesn't require much input. If you meet those standards, you get the general permit. They're turned around very quickly. Typically, data centers of this size are above that amount, which causes them to get an individual permit. Those individual permits are more complex, and they do include a 30-day public notice period where people can write in about the permits and have that. If you go to our website, it lists all the different types of permits we do. If you have any problems or can't find anything, let us know. We're glad to help you out. Chesapeake Bay, one of our main goals, to try and make it a productive fishery. So we do that by doing compensation and mitigation of impacting wetlands. So if you impact wetlands, you have to mitigate or compensate for it. And we're always looking for the least environmentally impact. I'm trying not to use acronyms tonight, but we use something called LEDPA, which is the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative. It's a mouthful, but really what we're saying is do the least amount of harm. If you have to build in an area, don't fill in the creek through a culvert, build a small overpass or possibly relocate the site. So we're looking at ways to try and minimize the impact of the environment. We also do a lot of work with the Department of Conservation and Department of Wildlife to protect threatened and endangered species. Those studies are done as part of the permitting process. Next, we look at water permitting, and it could be withdrawal. Withdrawal could be from a local river, could be from groundwater. We have people always looking at the lakes around here and say, wow, Lake Anna looks like a great source. We have to remind them that that is Dominion's surface impoundment for the nuclear plant. That is not a source of water for water permitting for the discharges associated with cooling, as we heard earlier. If you are discharging again to surface water, you would need a permit. The permit could either be a general permit if you're discharging less than 50,000 gallons per day, or could be an individual permit if you're above that amount. Again, different standards require different types of public inputs, but any of the individual permits do get public participation. People get to comment on the permits. Finally, air permitting. I'm kind of skipping over petroleum permitting because there's really not that much unless they're going to have large-scale tanks there. The belly tanks that are underneath the generators, those are exempt, so we really don't do a lot of regulations with them unless they have a large-scale storage facility above. One for people's awareness of air quality than we've ever seen before. Virginia has done a remarkable job over the last 10 years in decreasing the amount of ozone days. We used to have all these air quality alerts that would say, please don't drive to work or limit. If you notice, in the last 10 years, they've been getting fewer and fewer, and Caroline County has probably some of the best air that they've had these days. That's part of Virginia's trying to make sure that we regulate the air and do the best we can. Air permitting is very complex because you're trying to figure out what is subject, and it's not just one little unit. We're looking at a data center, which could be 200 3.5 megawatt diesel generators. So you have to take a look at that, and those aren't built that they're going to have that exact amount. They're built for redundancy. So they're built so that if one goes down, you have a backup. As the old saying goes, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. If you only have one and it goes down, so they always have limits for maintenance, how often you can run them, like 100 hours a year. It could be how much throughput of fuel you can run them or the hours. Through our permits, we set emission limits and testing and record-keeping reporting. So we know how much they're running it, and they have to tell us. We do have a lot of enforcement cases where people inadvertently ran over the amount of time, and we had to come back in and take them to enforcement. Even though they voluntarily disclosed that information, it was against the regulations, so we took them to enforcement. So emergency generation is, take some questions afterwards, but thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next, we have Joey Schiebel. He's Caroline County Director of Public Works and Utilities, and he's going to talk to you about water, wastewater, and reuse water.
Good evening. As Mr. Cully said, I am the director of the county's public water and wastewater system utilities, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about our, there we go. So data centers, cooling requirements. So computer servers generate a lot of heat that need to be cooled. So we've heard about different technologies, anywhere from air-cooled to water-cooled systems that are heavily utilized. There are some new technologies that allow servers to run warmer, but still there's cooling needs that are required. So industrial cooling for data centers is a seasonal issue. A lot of people think that when they need to use 200,000 gallons a day, that's every single day. That's not true. Typical usage is over a 6 to 7 month period. April through October is normal, and little to no usage November through March. Cooling water is a So one of the things that hasn't been discussed by any of the presenters so far is reuse water. So reuse is wastewater treatment discharge that typically goes to a stream. Currently, Caroline County has a 1.5 MGD, a million gallon a day wastewater treatment plant, and it is permitted to go to 3 million gallons a day. One of the things that we know is to be able to permit to go on beyond 3 million gallons a day is we need to figure out where we're going to get nitrogen and phosphorus allocations. So DEQ is kind of giving us than what the state says it can do just by paper. So it's doing really good the way that it's running. But our current low average, the discharge is 413,000 gallons a day. And it's not keeping up. Watch it jump like 5 slides. There it goes. Thank you. So cooling water return. So data centers, when they're using the cooling water, it's actually evaporating. So about 75% of that water just disappears, it evaporates and goes into the environment. The other 25% of that returns back to the wastewater treatment plant. So when we look at a cooling of the water, so if we're providing 100,000 gallons a day, 25,000 gallons comes back. So as that comes back, we're able to reuse that water as well. So you take the 413 that we're at, if you were to add 25% of years, and we come close to almost 500,000 gallons of new use just by our typical growth that we've seen over the past 10 years. So the 413, the 103, and the 80,000 gallons gives you almost 600,000 gallons a day of cooling water through 2025. So that's a substantial amount of water that would be typically discharged into a stream that could now go into a data center and use for cooling. So potable water and sewer demands, a data center building typically has an approximately 2,000 gallons of potable water and sewer each day. So looking at other water types that the county has, we have a well system. So in our well system, it's divided by the groundwater management area. This management area runs along the sediment overlay area, essentially following the I-95 corridor and eastward. All of the wells that the county currently utilizes in the Carmel Church Ladysmith system are west of I-95. So we're in the bedrock area. So we don't fall under the groundwater management area, but there's still a concern anytime well development for future water needs. So currently we have 2 wells that'll be coming online next year. That'll give us an additional 342,000 gallons of new water, or 238 gallons per minute. We also have 2 wells that have been approved by the Virginia Department of Health, and we are working on site access issues to be able to get to the site to actually drill those 2 wells. We've also identified 4 other locations, and we'll be doing the electrical resistivity testing, which will help us to identify the best location to drill a well. So we've been looking at a lot of mapping, trying to figure out where the best place is to drill it. Now we'll go in and actually do this testing, and it should really help pinpoint some larger wells. We've been really successful over the last 20 years in doing that. And the last thing I'd like to discuss is the Rappahannock River intake project that the county's been working on. So the Caroline County Board of Supervisors has recognized that wells are not a viable mid or long-term solution for portable water permit application in March of 2005. So to do that, it spent quite a bit of time of putting together all the information and data to be able to submit that. Since then, I'm just going to go through a bunch of things that we've done to show you all the things and the progression that we've seen from then until now. November of 2006, we did the alternative water supply analysis. August of 2008, we did a fish larvae study. January of 2011, a report of the estimated biological efficiency wedge weir screening was completed. Of 16, we updated the county's water master plan. August of 17, we did a local partners meeting with the town of Port Royal, the town of Bowling Green, and King George County. In January of 2018, we developed a salinity model on the Rappahannock River. In March of 2019, we did an intake screen mitigation plan. September of 2019, we did a phase 1 historical and archaeological evaluation. In October of 2019, we did a water quality assessment and sanitary input from the public. We then spent the next 2 years or so trying to do the additional studies that DEQ requested. So 2019 was the threatened and endangered species study. November of the same year, the phase 1B cultural resource survey. The water of the United States impact analysis was done. March of 2022, the reissuance of the joint permit application was complete on daily demand projections to include the industrial cooling as a use. Up until this point, we hadn't had that in there. That wasn't something that was thought of for Caroline County. And when we met with DEQ recently, some of the additional studies that they requested in order for King George to be part of our permit application that they told us was we'd have to study the river, study the location of connection point, and those things were not done as part of that. They weren't brought to our attention. That was something that would be required for them to be part of this project. And because of that, which you can see here. So in our permit application, Caroline County, our total withdrawal for our average daily usage in 2038 is 7.9 million gallons a day, and the maximum daily withdrawal is 13.89 million gallons a day. So just in summary, Caroline County Public Utilities understands that water, sewer needs of data center. While data centers have not historically been considered in this area due to fiber latency, the industry has overcome that hurdle. If data centers are approved by the Board of Supervisors, Public Utilities will work with these facilities to meet their requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. As you can see, we've been working on the Rappahannock project a long time. Next, we have Courtney Rogers, Senior Vice President with Davenport. They are the county's financial advisors and have been so for a number of years, and he's going to give a financial overview.
Save the best for last. A lot of good numbers here. All right, I'm not going to be too long, but what I wanted to do is start out. So let's start at what the revenue implications for the county might be when it comes to both real estate and personal property. And what we use is our experience with several clients from around the state. Data centers are going to come in all shapes and sizes. One of the things we're going to do is show a couple of different scenarios so you can kind of see what a small one might look like and what a large one may look like in terms of the numbers. So these we're going to have 3 different hypothetical cases. If you'll give me the next slide, please. The first one's going to be 100,000 square foot data center development. To give you a sense of size, the McKesson distribution, what we're going to do is assume 100,000 additional square foot growth each year. In other words, that as you heard from a lot of the speakers tonight, this is something that's continuing to grow in the state, and depending upon power and water needs could continue to grow. So we've got some growth scenarios. It's going to assume the real estate tax rate stays at 77 cents per 100 assessed value. And then the personal property tax rate is $1.25 per 100 assessed value, and that is something that the county set as an incentive for getting some of these data centers to come down to this part of the state. So the first set of numbers, I know it's going to be hard to see up there on the screen, so I'm just going to read you. The first, so when it comes to the two different data streams or revenue streams here, the real estate is going to be the most dependable because it's basically based on the value of the property. See, the data center personal property, what you're going to have to understand is that the equipment that's in there basically depreciates each year. And then after so many years, depending upon the type of equipment, they're going to come in and refresh it. And that's going to depend upon what the values of the new equipment is. As we've all seen with our computers, they've generally gotten faster, sometimes cheaper. So they're up to, by year 20, at about $700,000 per year. For a 500,000 square foot, again, you're looking at maybe 500,000 to begin with, and it's going to grow very quickly up to about 3.5 million. For a 1,000,000 square feet, again, it's going to start at around 500,000, and it's going to grow, again, 100,000 square foot up to that point to about $7 million per year. So pretty good size numbers. If we go to the next slide and we look at the personal property, what you're going to see is the first 3 years are a little bit larger than the rest. You'll see the refreshes. And again, as I stated just a moment ago, you can see it's all over the place. Part of it is build out. Part of it is just some equipment lasts longer than others and has to be refreshed. So the numbers here, again, could be upwards of a 1.3 million for the smaller facility, but then it's going to shrink down as much as $12,000 in 1 year. When you get up to the 1,000,000 square foot, it can go from up to 2 to 3 million to begin with, up to maybe 5 million in the middle, and then as things down the road get refreshed, could be as much as 2 million. So what we did on this last slide, which again, I know it's going to be hard to see these tiny numbers. The bottom line and that can range anywhere from a couple $1 million in the early years up to maybe $10, $11 million in the middle, and then back down to around $10 million on the back end. And as the advisor, what we see is that's something that this county could use to. We've got a water system that we've got to pay for that, whether these projects come or not, is going to be needed down the road to supply folks who are going to be coming in the future. You've also got schools that I know folks want to see updated and are going to grow as well. So our key takeaways here on the last slide, if you would, please. Thank you. Is that because we did a rating earlier this year, 32% of their budget is personal property taxes from these buildings. I don't see that here. Obviously, they're the home of the internet, but it is a considerable amount of their budget. On the estimated tax generated side, again, the revenue from the real estate side is going to be a little bit more predictable. On the personal property side, it's going to be a little bit more seasonal, and it's going to fluctuate based on depreciation as well as how fast they change these out. One of the things that Loudoun experienced recently was a drop in their revenues, and they went and talked to the data. Hopefully that's helpful, and look forward to any questions you guys may have.
Thank you, Courtney. We appreciate that. All right, I don't have but 4 people signed up, so I'll just call those in the order that they signed up. Kevin Collins, if you've got a question. Oh, that's fine. Some of my staff taking notes.
Good evening, Kevin Collins. First question is a little bit of clarification. Seen any indication that there's a project designated in the eastern portion of the new PERT unless something has changed recently? I was wondering if you could clarify that for us. Because we have 2 PERTs. One is the Matamede and one is the one east of Carmel Church.
The MC Dean area.
Right. So there are 2 areas designated, the Matamede and the area which is in the.
But you indicated one project was sent back to the Planning Commission. That project is not located in that area.
I don't think I referenced the project.
In that area, and that's not true. That project that was sent back was denied 5-0 at the Planning Commission and 4-2 and then revisited. So I just want clarification that there are not 2 projects. There's the Matamede, which was already approved prior to the town hall, and then this second mysterious project in the Carmel Church area you speak of?
So again, there is a new filing that was last week. We got a case that is in the Carmel Church area.
Okay. That's all I needed to know. I just want a clarification. Thank you. Second question, I don't know who can answer this. Why wasn't this scheduled for the 30th? There was no way that you could have maybe perhaps pushed out that decision to approve 900 acres before allowing the community to come together?
That is a question you'll have to ask the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
This is when we could assemble these folks, was tonight.
Agreed. Okay.
So we didn't.
Okay. It just seems a little fishy that you would have a town hall data center meeting 6 days after you approved gallons a day. Project Tract, which has been already denied by the Planning Commission. Project Clean Arc, and there was a third, I can't remember the name of it. So I'd like to know the discrepancy between 200,000 gallons a day and the reported 4.4 million. Paper quoted, I don't know who they quoted, but they got their information as 4.4 million gallons a day. Next question for Mr. Scheibel. Do we currently have any reuse water being used in the county? Is there even a system in place?
No, I can answer that. You didn't have to get up. No.
And then I believe that was it. And then the numbers on revenue were off. I just saw a post recently. The chairman of the board said
I haven't seen the quote that you just gave, but as you saw, well, you probably could hardly see it.
Yeah,
I
I couldn't
apologize.
see
I'm
any of
happy
that,
to share them
actually.
with you.
Is there a way that these slides can be sent out to emails after?
It's up to the county. It's a public document.
Okay.
But the numbers are all over the place because things change.
Exactly.
Okay?
That was my point.
And some of this data, the sizes are different. Companies are different. Company A comes and bills over here, may have different data needs than company B over here. We're just trying to give you a sense.
Okay.
Okay. This is not an exact science.
No, and I understand that. It's just when one group is saying one thing and another group saying another thing.
They've not asked me. They've not. This is the first time they've seen those numbers. I can't tell you where those came from.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Cully, for setting this up. Appreciate it.
Thanks to Mr. Parton and staff, Mr. Wilson, everybody reaching out to various partners to try to get everybody here.
One of the questions I have is, what are you going to do with all the electronic waste that will be replaced every 5 years? Where is it going, in a landfill? What's going to happen to it? I don't know if you want to answer this one by one, but my other question is, what happens if they're now, or do I just rattle off my questions one by one?
No, somebody from the industry might be able to speak to that. I'm not sure about the lithium battery part, but.
I'll comment on the first question, which most major server owners have e-waste recycling contracts at scale because these are valuable components. So these are recycled back in and repurposed as future server components. That's the typical makeup of the recycling process there. For the fire piece, that's probably for somebody from the county. I will say, as a developer and operator, we always work closely with the fire department and
various things that are part of the building code for that use.
Okay. I want to know about the bottom line financially about our county. There's this two for one matching grants that we're going to be coming up with. And then with the depreciation on the personal property tax, do you really know how much we're really going to be getting annually from the data centers?
That depends on build out, but the 2-for-1 match is a state part of the program for the AWS only, did to attract Amazon to invest all the money that they're investing throughout the state. Ours counts for infrastructure, so the one that was approved, the infrastructure, the development of that, even though a lot of that is being done by Spotsylvania, that counts as the match because the stuff's being built in Caroline. You have anything you want to add to that? But it's legislation.
Well, when will the reuse water system be set up between Spotsylvania and Caroline for Amazon?
They're working on that now. They've got to get their agreements to them. They have to have all of that to be able to build wastewater and reuse pipes to the site. There's no infrastructure at the site currently.
Right, I'm sure. How much electricity the data centers are going to be using. So
I understand. A question. Please try to keep it to a question.
Sorry.
The comments can be made to the board. They're the ones that vote on these things.
Okay. What happens during a power outage? Who gets the electricity preferentially?
That would be a good question for Dominion. I don't know that these are turned back because they do have the ability to self-sustain, but they might be able to answer that better than I can, whether they have them on the very first or not.
In power outages, there are a few people like hospitals who are priority and they get restored power first. After that, it's a full study of the system because, again, it's what caused the outage, where's the root of it. It could be anywhere from something on a transmission line to something that took out a substation to something that just took out a line to a building. So again, when we have to, there's also just logical flows. I can't fix a line going to somebody's house if the substation's down. So it's a variety. It's really complicated, and they do a lot of logistics, but it's already prioritizing what fix needs to get done first and how many people does it impact. And we're going for those large numbers of, we can get this many homes powered back up, we can get this many homes, and they just check it all the way down. They bring in crews from other states, they do all sorts of things. So the only one truly prioritized is things that are critical, like hospitals.
Okay, I don't think that answers my question. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Tim Beverly.
Fire and Emergency Services. 35 years career, 35 years as a volunteer between Stafford and Caroline, and 25 years on the career side from Department of the Army, where I retired as a fire inspector and fire investigator. So my question is, what type of fire suppression system are they using?
You didn't leave me your email. I might be able to get you that if I can't get it answered. If you would leave your email, we'd be glad to email that out to you.
Okay. Now, the other thing about grid power, what can they use the type of green power there? All
of our servers are all backed up by UPS before our building generator starts, but they're not designed to just run without the generator. So I'm pretty sure they can't run their water system and their air conditioning systems and fans on UPSs. So they've got to have those generators running if the grid goes down, but they're sized for the grid.
Okay. All right. I'll get you my email.
Yeah, you can write it on the sheet or bring it to us after the meeting. Kyle Hart.
Profit dedicated to protecting and enhancing America's national parks. I have a couple of questions. Not really sure where to start, so I'll start with Dominion Energy. In Dominion's most recent IRP, they acknowledged essentially that data centers are the only growing demand in the state, that every other sort of source of demand is flat or declining. I'm kind of curious, did you as a company kind of think about possible ways to pass off cost of additional infrastructure onto this industry, which of course. And in your IRP, what did Dominion acknowledge is going to happen to base bills for Dominion customers? If the status quo is sort of the same.
Sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, so Dominion acknowledged in their IRP pretty sort of concerning things about what base bills are going to look like for Dominion customers. Can you acknowledge publicly what that's going to look like?
There's other initiatives that are driving the need for infrastructure and infrastructure improvements.
Tim, would you care to comment on that?
No, please say it. I'd rather this be a dialogue because I think it's important we have this conversation. Electric vehicles is by no means, nor was it acknowledged in your IRP, driving the energy demand. It is specific to data center growth. And this has been acknowledged as well by PJM and the Department of Environmental Quality. It would be enough power to light up half of New York City. So I just want to make sure that the conversation is clear, that it's a false equivalency to have electric vehicles be part of the discussion. It is data centers predominantly.
And provided the answer that I was looking for, so I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming up to the hot seat. I know you're not Dominion Energy, but you're here tonight on behalf of them. So I apologize that you got that, but that is the reality of the situation.
Understood.
So my next question is for, I believe, Kevin from the industry. It's obvious that Dominion is going to charge customers to support infrastructure for this one industry. So everybody that pays a Dominion.
For industry writ large, but I think the legislature and the SEC are the ones who will determine that.
So can we have your commitment that when those bills come before the General Assembly, you as an industry leader would support those bills?
I have no idea there's not even a draft bill, so I can't commit to something I've never seen.
Okay, fair enough. What about bills to say commit the industry to 100% clean energy by 2050?
I believe that's already the case through the Virginia Clean.
At VCEA to support the data center industry?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, actually, and something we would consider since all of us pretty much have a target well more aggressive than that. And I would actually say that, you know, we're big supporters of being decision maker for why you go to a market is to help us meet our corporate goals. So.
Okay. And then one more question for you, since sort of by default, you're the industry representative here tonight. NBCA has been a leader in a fight against several projects, particularly in Prince William County, that have caused great community consternation due to their proximity to national parks and other historic resources. Do you have any comments about how the industry could maybe be a leader on that and stop, you know, building huge data centers next to national parks?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. The comment that I'll say is that here in Caroline County and in the surrounding counties, they've done their homework, and I think have been thoughtful about that in pushing industry in the right direction for the right sites. The conversation always starts with the locality before we even spend a dollar, right? And so that'll be my comment, which is I think the homework done here in Caroline around that specific issue has been pretty smart.
Okay, there's questions about that, but thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
I'm Mark Atkinson. I live over by Charlesburg, and there's been so many statistics thrown out tonight that I'm really kind of confused, but I wanted to kind of follow up on a couple of larger concepts. First of all, I don't understand, I'm given to understand that the electric companies, REC and Dominion, however it's going to be involved, are going to have to increase capacity in order to accommodate the demand from the data centers in general. I'd like to know if that's correct. And also, where is this additional energy coming from? I heard something about Dominion needing to, having previously made a promise to retire some coal facilities, and now they're saying they can't. Of course, REC buys its power it doesn't generate, so I don't understand where the power is coming from and how it's going to be met in the context of Virginia's clean energy goals.
So from a infrastructure perspective, kind of I was talking about provides to Dominion.
But how does that fit in with the context of Virginia's clean energy goals?
I think what we're kind of starting to see is the demand is kind of outpacing some of those goals. And I think we're going to, from a company standpoint, do all that we can to remain a safe and reliable grid. So some of those timelines may shift, but we're still studying that kind of over our next couple of years. In our IRP, you'll notice some of that information.
That's scary to me. That's very scary to me as a consumer and as somebody who I'm a tree farmer and I'm watching the effects of global warming. To know if the generators, well, first of all, is there an expected number of hours or an anticipated number of hours that the generators would be running? anticipating what the normal amount of outages that we have? Are there projections?
That's regulated by DEQ as for how much they can exercise the generators, and sometimes
If electricity coming to them, that the generators would be turned on?
no, you have
That would never happen.
No, just like your house, if you put in a home standby generator, that doesn't supplement power. It replaces power. It's called a transfer switch.
Okay.
It transfers the load from the grid to the generator system, and there's no additional
So they're either
generator
getting
running, generating
power or they're
power,
not getting
because then
power.
that could be going out on the grid going the other way. That would be
Okay.
No, it's one or the other, grid or generator.
So is there a projection of how often they would be?
Burn to keep the engines greased and moving. So you say anywhere from 10 to 100 hours a year, based upon they would be not all done at the same time. They would be done in a rolling sequence. And again, that is specifically limited within the permit that's issued by DEQ.
So what would happen if they get to that point?
If they go over that amount, and then if it was not an emergency situation, then they could be fined. They could be taken to enforcement to go ahead and deal with it that way. And we have several cases that have gone through there.
Okay. And then if I may, one more question about the water. I really worry the summers are getting longer and hotter and drier, and I worry about my own well without any data centers around. And I've heard a lot of really interesting before the additional approvals are given.
The county has a plan currently. It's a short-range plan of continued well development and reuse. Once we have enough revenue coming that we can have a revenue anticipation bond, then we can start the project from the Rappahannock to bring water, which would then replace our complete well system with water from the Rappahannock through a treatment facility, which would improve everybody's water, both at the data centers and in their homes, because it wouldn't be coming out of the bedrock with a lot of the minerals that happen now. So short-term wells until correct, but we're not going to have anything that's going to, if you build one building, we can support that off of wells for the in foreseeable future. We have currently available water right now that we can produce that we don't use without the wells he's talking about coming online that we already have for another couple 100,000 gallons, 300,000 gallons a day. So we already have excess water in the system.
Is it possible that it could be like many, many years before the river water was available? 20 years? Could that
it could easily be 20 years or 30 years if we don't have anything to support that with revenue. So if we don't do any data centers and don't have any other industry, then it'll be a long time before we get to the river.
But it sounds like the data centers are coming in, and we've got a lot of straws into the ground right now and more coming in. And I just really worry. We're getting more and more they were talking about 5 days, I think, that were peak usage.
7 to 10 days peak usage.
Peak usage.
And you have to plan for that. So you've got a lot of water. There may be water that's stored in tanks. There's lots of things they can do to meet that peak demand, other than making sure you have enough water for 10 days.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's my question, but I'm just worried about my well running dry.
Right. I understand. You're a shallow well or deep well?
I've got a deep well, and I know the county's got deeper wells, but eventually that water is going to run out.
That's why we're trying to get to the Rappahannock. That's liable to happen whether we do anything. Any further questions from anybody that didn't sign up?
My name is Brent Hunsinger. I'm with Friends of the Rappahannock. Appreciate you all having us out here tonight and doing this for us. My question is for Kevin. Good to see you again, sir.
There you go.
Better. Okay, thank you. What is the cost, the difference in cost and perhaps water usage between the closed-looped glycol cooling systems and the water-cooled systems that you discussed earlier?
Yeah, that's a great question. The cost is less on the infrastructure side of the facility. It's more around there's an added cost to using a closed loop system because you're using more power, so you're metering more. So I can't give a specific number, but essentially if you see a 5% loss of efficiency at scale, it can be pretty costly over time. Just paying for a lot more power.
Right. So is there a water usage difference? Like, is it per million square feet, per building? Like, what is that?
Yeah, so in a closed loop system, so I can say for a stack infrastructure basis of design, which is about a 250,000 square foot facility, after we charge our closed loop system with glycol and a little bit of water, we're effectively just flushing toilets, running sinks, and then maybe there's a maintenance refill every several years. And it's really kind of more like your car. You're just kind of adding a little bit rather than a full flush. So it's a significant difference.
When is the decision made what type of system you're going to use, and is that shared before it goes to the planning commission?
So from a developer perspective, it will be typically so I don't put computers in the data halls, right? I build facilities to have those computers in them. So typically when I have a tenant, and that could be, it's typically before site plan, and we'll have a good idea, because what we need to be prepared for is either. And so we'll both have a plan for if we will have a water cooled system. And then so we know there's no surprise there if we have a water demand, if we built it out that way. But if we then have a tenant, maybe that tenant maybe changes their mind too, or we have some conversation, we know maybe we'll move more towards a closed loop with some of the facilities. So in a way, we're pretty risk averse. And so we'd rather be upfront with, the highest potential demand rather than, a surprise down the road.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
I'll add a little bit to that. The county's going to need to know whether it's closed loop or water. So we'll need to know water load in the planning stages, when somebody first comes to us, we sign an NDA. And
Right. So with the Rappahannock JPA, those decisions have already been made for some of those projects where some of that estimated cooling water is going to be going to in the future. You've already decided because you have allocations already set up in that JPA.
Correct, because we had that what we did was we replaced that with what we already had in there for King George when the state decided to add in a bunch of extra studies they wanted King George to do.
Right.
And we couldn't wait 5 more years or 6 more years for them to do those. Had they told us that at the beginning, we'd have probably had all those studies done because King George could have gotten them done. But we had to, so we didn't want to lose. When you're going in the river, you want to try to maximize, because you're not going to do it again, what your build out may be. A lot of those are estimates, but there's a lot of land that'll probably be developed in Carolina along the 95 corridor, just like it has north of us as it runs down into Hanover, where it's the same development along that in the Golden Crescent. Not going to happen in Sparta or near Port Royal as much, but we have the plan to have water from somewhere because we don't think we can depend long term on groundwater in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. When we were planning this and when I went to the board back in 2012, 2013 and got them to restart this project and spend those dollars, it wasn't because any of those board members would probably be around when any of that happened, because we knew it was going to take a long time, but we had to at least have a way for water for people in the future. So, well, some of that may be data centers. We can't guarantee that because they may ultimately all decide they want to go the air-cooled closed loop way and have more power coming from solar or wind or wherever, along with fossil fuels or nuclear or whatever, and not have as much water use. But we're still going to need it for ultimate development of, housing and things that are going to go on. You got anything?
Yeah. I was just going to add a couple of the studies that we actually performed early on were actually for 18 million gallons a day. However, when we got down to crunching numbers of development and what's been approved and trying to project out to 2038, we couldn't come anywhere near those numbers. But that was an original number that we did some of the testing to, just to say, all right, we need to test to see what we can get to. So, we ended up a lot lower number than that. But, just as we're trying to justify and showing DEQ as we're going through that permit process, exactly, how many homes are currently here, what's in the current comp plan, what can be built in those, and trying to lay out what that growth could look like. Who's got the crystal ball to know that we were going to have, the Depression, 10 years ago and where we're at. So we're trying to give the best case scenario to 2038 of kind of where we project we're going to be as we're trying to put those together.
Sir,
yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Anybody else? information. And please stay tuned to board meetings and planning commission meetings. That's where the action will be. Thank you.